Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks, first of all, to Jim Gilhooly for the opening remarks today. Welcome, as Jim says, to Hamilton Town House for today's event. This is the South Lanarkshire Council Scottish Independence Referendum debate. Today's event, being oversubscribed as it was, is an illustration of how important this is to our young citizens, how important it is that they want to do the right thing in the forthcoming independence referendum, one of the most important decisions of any of our lifetimes, for that matter. Today we're aiming to promote democracy and raise awareness of the issues involved. So no one's going to come to blows today. No heated debates, no falling out, no sparks flying. We don't plan to exert any influence on you young voters today, and indeed we won't be asking you to make up your minds here and now. It's important that we all learn from what we hear and we leave here today better informed in order to make that important decision in September. So you ask, what are the voting pads for? Well, we'd like to measure your involvement in the referendum debate now and in September. We've got a series of innocuous questions that we'd like you to answer. But before we do that, let's keep your voting pads at the ready. I want to introduce our panel to you, first of all, today. On my far right, your left, is from the Yes campaign, Linda Fabiani, MSP, Elaine C. Smith, actress and activist, and Michael Gray from Business for Scotland. Ladies and gentlemen, the Yes panel. To my left from the No campaign, we have Daniel Swan, Better Together Youth Rep, Mike Daly of the Govan Law Centre, and Annabel, Goldie, MSP. We'll come to the panel very shortly, but first of all, I have that series of questions I'd like you to answer, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, our No campaign, yes. First, now to the questions that we'd like you to answer, so keep the voting pads at the ready. We would like you to answer this, first of all. Are you eligible to vote in the referendum? Yes, no, or not sure. 1, yes, 2 for no, 3 for not sure. Okay, we have the votes in for that question. And the result says 79% of you are eligible to vote, 19% not eligible, and 2% not sure. Interesting stuff. We need to talk. Okay, question 2. Have you registered to vote in the referendum? 1 for yes, 2 for no. All right, the votes are in. 54% have registered. 46% have not registered. Well, hopefully there's still time to do that. We can hopefully change your mind before we go any further today. Have you received, question 3, have you received information about the referendum? Answer 1, yes, if you've received a lot. Answer 2, yes, you've received some. 3, if you think you've received a little information. And 4, if you feel you have received no information. I think all the votes are in there. 21% of you feel that you have received a lot of information. 25% think some. Interestingly, 38% of you feel you've received a little, and 16% of you there feel that you have received no information. Well, we are going to put that one right for you here today. Question 4. Do you feel well informed about the referendum and the issues involved? Yes, you feel fully informed, number 1. Button 2, if you feel partly informed. Button 3, if you feel that you have not been well informed about the referendum and the issues involved. Final answer? 18% feel they've been fully informed on this, 47% partly informed, but 35%, once again, fairly high percentage, 1/3 of you feel that you haven't been well informed about this referendum and the issues involved. Again, we'll try to put that right for you this afternoon. The 5th question now, the penultimate question. Do you intend to vote in the referendum? 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for not sure. That's if you're eligible, do you intend to vote? 85% intend to vote, 10% do not, 5% haven't quite made up their minds yet. So not a lot to work with there, but we'll get into your heads this afternoon. And finally, have you already decided how you are going to vote? No option to tell us how, but just tell us if you've made up your mind. Sharp intake of breath. 63% have decided how they're going to vote. 37% of you haven't made up your minds yet. So, a lot to work with, young, fertile minds to play with here today, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks indeed for everyone for taking part in that short survey. Some interesting findings in that little survey there. A lot to work on, a lot to play with today. A lot of undecided people as to whether you're going to vote or not, and how you're going to vote if and when you do. So let's see if we can crystallize some ideas in your heads as we go through this afternoon. First of all, we're going to hear one opening speech from each side of the debate here today, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that the first speaker will be Mike Daly of the Govan Law Centre. If you'd care to take to the lectern, thank you. Mike is speaking on behalf of the No campaign here today. If you'd like to give him your attention. Mike Daly.
Thanks, Angus. First of all, can I just say my thanks to you, the pupils and the teachers, for organising what is an incredibly impressive event. So thank you very much for that. I can also say to those 46% of you who've not yet bothered to register, it's dead easy. You can do it online, and I would encourage you to do so, because I think we would all agree that our future is at stake here. So we need you to register. Now, I've got a 5-year-old son, and the question that always arises every weekend with my wee son is, which park should we go to play in? There's a wee park just next to where we stay on the south side of Glasgow, and of course there's a huge park just down the road which is Pollock Country Park, and it's got a flying fox and lots of things which are really exciting. Not surprisingly, my son prefers big parks because they're more fun. And in relation to the Scottish referendum on the 18th of September, I think we need to ask ourselves, why do we want to play in a smaller park? What's the point of that when we're already part of a much bigger one? Being in the UK has created fantastic opportunities for Scots, not just now, but throughout the ages. In recent times, even Doctor Who has been Scottish. Twice, in fact. We've got Paisley's David Tennant, and we've now got Glasgow's Peter Capaldi. Now, of course, Doctor Who is filmed in Cardiff, and at the moment, Wales is part of your country. I think Scottish actors, musicians and artists have flourished in the UK. And also, if you think about sports people, we've got Sir Chris Hoy, we've got Andy Murray, who have had world-class success as athletes. And they would both acknowledge that they have benefited from the advantages as being part of Team GB. They've said so on the record. And the funny thing is, did you know that Scots have actually been run in the UK for a very long time? We've had, in more recent times, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, Alistair Darling. But you'll also find Scots at the heart of the UK in terms of every aspect of civic life and every aspect of power that's exercised in our country. And this has happened over the centuries. For example, if we go back to 1762, the Prime Minister of Great Britain was John Stuart, who was a Scot. If we go back to 1835, the Speaker of the House of Commons was another Scot, James Abercrombie. And remarkably, between 1790 and 1820, would you believe that there were 130 Scots representing not constituencies in Scotland, but English seats. It's 130 Scots. If we go back to the 17th century, and this is not a history lecture, so don't worry, there were profound divisions between Highland Scots and Lowland Scots. Actually, the Highland Scots didn't go on with the Lowland Scots, and the Lowland Scots were much more closer in the things that they cared about with their English neighbours. So, we have a common history in the UK. We have a shared culture, which is probably not that unsurprising, given that we all live on an island, which is not that big. The national records for Scotland show that there are almost 1 million people who were born in Scotland currently living in England. It's 1 million Scots living in England. And almost 500,000 people born in England currently live in Scotland. And if you factor in second and third generations, you realise that over time we've become completely intermingled and intertwined. Now, every family will have its own story. My Dundonian father, you might not notice my Dundonian accent, I've lived in Glasgow for a long time, he had 4 sisters and 3 brothers. Both my father and my Uncle Frank decided to live in Dundee and spent all their life raising a family and made their fortune in Dundee. But all of his sisters and 2 of his brothers went to England and South Africa. So I've got an incredible amount of English cousins, and I would imagine that quite a lot of you in the audience have got English cousins and Welsh cousins and cousins from Northern Ireland. No one really bats an eye about that, because at the end of the day, we're all Scottish, we're English, we're Welsh, we're Northern Irish, but we're also British. So if Scotland leaving the UK isn't about Scottish nationalism per se, because the old Scottish expression, we're all Jock Tamson's bairns, what is it about? And this is where I find it genuinely very, very difficult to see the logic of leaving the UK. We're all told that an independent Scotland will be fairer, more equal, and more prosperous. And all I'd ask you to do is just look at the evidence. That's all I'm asking you to do. In 2012, we had a fiscal deficit of 18.2 billion. Now, a fiscal deficit is the difference between what a government spends and what a government earns. If you add in Scotland's geographical share of North Sea oil tax, that deficit dropped to 7.6 billion. But notice how that figure fluctuates. It would have been 14.5 billion in 2010, even with all of Scotland's oil thrown into the equation. So we have a big deficit. And let's not forget, we always say it's Scotland's oil. People in Shetland would say it's Shetland's oil. 67% of North Sea oil actually is in the boundaries of the Shetland Islands. And some Shetlanders have argued for independence. Why not? By the logic of the Scottish independence debate, why shouldn't Shetlanders have their own referendum? Because they've got 67% of the oil. Now, alternatively, you might believe it's better and fairer to share and pool resources across the UK. You might believe in solidarity with your neighbours, with your family, with your friends, through the good times and through the bad times. And if Scotland still has a big deficit after 90% of the oil revenue, how would we be better off under voting yes in September this year? Around 2/3 of our trade is with the rest of the UK. Being in the UK is our best trading union. It's miles better than the EU in terms of trade. The explanation that we've been given by the SNP in the Yes campaign is that we would be better off because we would tax corporations, that's business, by 3% less. And that would then, and this is a big assumption, that would then attract and create lots of jobs by being friendlier to big business. Now, I was a kid in the 1980s, and all I'll say is that I remember that was tried, and there was more unemployment, and there was more poverty. There's few people in our country that abhor injustice and inequality more than me. I've spent 20 years fighting for justice, working in a charitable community law centre. I want to live in a Scotland where poverty is a historical concept. Every child and adult has the same equality and opportunity in life, have a decent home, job, education, but voting yes or no has got nothing to do with that. We've got the powers right now to tackle inequality. We could put a penny on income tax to tackle child poverty. I'd pay it. We could change unfair council tax. We can have a Scottish living wage. The Scottish Government has not used the powers it already has. We can have the best of both worlds. Choose how to do things, enjoy the trade benefits and security of being in the UK. The real debate, and I'll finish on this.
Time's up, Mike, please.
Well, I won't finish on that then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks indeed to Mike Daly of the Govan Law Centre. We should point out that because we're promoting democracy today, we're doing everything as democratically as we possibly can. Before we came on stage, we tossed a coin as to which side should speak to you first today. Each of the speeches and all of the answers will be very carefully timed, which is why you're hearing extraneous voices coming from out of the ether, so that each person speaks for exactly the same length of time. Now we move to the other side of this debate now, to the Yes campaign. To speak on their behalf, Michael Gray from Business for Scotland.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you all today. It's really exciting having a large audience of young people debating your future. But before I go into my own points, I just wanted to explain to everyone here how I ended up standing on this stage feeling slightly nervous. When I was at school, I cared about politics, but I didn't trust any of the politicians. I cared about where I lived, but I didn't have much trust in any campaign or any group or any way or means of making where I lived a better place. I've always been a bit sceptical, but in the last couple of years, having been undecided about independence, I started looking at the evidence. I started reading up on some of the facts online and reading about Scotland's future. And it was when I made that decision that I changed my mind, and I went from being uninformed and not knowing about the issue to standing here on this stage. I've never joined a political party. There's always good things about every different one. You know, there's a lot of what Mike said that I agree with. There's lots of things that they'll say tonight that I do. But what I'm certain about is that Scottish independence is the greatest opportunity in our lifetime to create a better Scotland. It's not about any of the false divisions that often come up in political debate. It's about Scotland's future, and it's about creating a better country. And just to respond to some of the things Mike said, first of all, before I start my points, he said that Scotland has great artists, great sports people and great politicians through the centuries. And that's true. To me, that's evidence that Scotland can be a successful, independent country. That we have got the skill, the talents and the wealth to be successful when we make our own decisions. Mike also said that he cares about family and where his family come from, and I agree. Like, my cousins stay down in Leeds, and I love them to bits. But I don't need David Cameron to love my cousin. I don't need Westminster governments to care about my family, whether they live in Newcastle, Edinburgh or Dublin. That's not what this debate is about. And he also spoke about economics, and I'm going to speak about that a lot in my speech. I think there's great evidence that Scotland is a wealthy country, and there's even more evidence that says Scotland will be better off if we have 100% control of our own affairs with independence. Because Mike asked what this debate was about, and for me it's about four things. First of all, it's about prosperity, it's about democracy, it's about social justice, and it's about Scotland playing a greater role in the international community. So let's look at prosperity first of all. If you look at economics, Scotland is a wealthy country. We have multi-billion-pound industries in construction, manufacturing, tourism. We have 5 of the world's top 200 universities, which means we have amazing research and development skills, and we have vast energy, fishing and agricultural resources. So the facts are all there that Scotland is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And what happens when you look at both sides of the balance sheet? Well, the main source for that is a report called the Gers Report. And if you look at that over the past 5 years, Scotland would have been £8.3 billion better off as an independent country. So if people came here today looking for more information, asking the question, can we afford to be independent? The answer is yes, we can. And if you look at public spending as well, over the last 5 years, Scotland's public spending has been a lower percentage of its gross domestic product compared to the UK as a whole. So that means services that we care about, like health, like education, like pensions for older members of our family, are all more affordable in Scotland than they are in the UK as a whole. Scotland is a wealthy country and will succeed as an independent country. But it's not just about the fact that Scotland is wealthy as it stands. It's about the fact that with independence, Scotland will have control over its own future. We'll have 100% control over decisions that affect our lives, and that's why it matters. Look at taxation, for instance. Like, I care and agree with a lot of Mike's principles in terms of what we could do at the moment. But Scotland only has 7% control of total tax powers as it stands. With independence, Scotland will have 100% control over its own tax powers. And I don't know about you, but if I was, in my job, if I only had control of 7% of my wage and someone else spent the other 93%, I wouldn't be too sure about continuing to work in that job. I'd want to change things. So that's one example for why Scotland would be better off. There's also a lot of money that can be saved in areas such as defence, in border agencies, and in terms of the overall tax administration as well, which means Scotland could save over £3 billion over the next Parliament in terms of financial savings. So that's another example of how Scotland would be better off. But what's that all for? It's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. For me, it's about opportunities to create jobs for young people and to have opportunities here in Scotland for people like you to have a better life. Like, over the last 30 years, for instance, how many factories have shut down in Lanarkshire as a result of Westminster governments that didn't stand up for the people of Scotland? How many factories can we open? How much more investment can we have in areas like advanced manufacturing and in the renewable energy sector with a Scottish government of whatever colour, of whatever shade, that stands up for the people who live here? With control over these areas, we can create more opportunities and create more jobs for young people. So that's the economy. But let's also talk about democracy, because that's the crux of it. Like, Scotland votes Labour continuously in election after election, but who do we have as Prime Minister? David Cameron, despite the fact that Scottish people did not elect him to that position. The old joke is that we have one Tory Member of Parliament in Scotland and two pandas in Edinburgh Zoo. Now, I'd rather have a government represented by people rather than pandas, and that's what you'd get in an independent Scotland. We would always get the government that the people of Scotland vote for, and that's something you can only get with independence. That means that all types of policies will represent the people who live here, rather than having Trident nuclear missiles on the Clyde or having the bedroom tax imposed on people and families in Scotland. Like, look at tuition fees, for instance. Because Scotland had control over education already in Scotland, universal education, higher education and colleges and universities are free for you once you leave school. But down in England, Westminster tripled tuition fees, and now it costs £27,000. That's the difference of independence. When we have control over issues like education, the Scottish Government, whether it's whatever party, makes better decisions about the people of Scotland. That's how democracy should work, and we don't have that at the moment. But it's also about social justice, because I believe that a country is only successful when everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. And I don't think we're getting that from Westminster. I think what we get from David Cameron's government is something that increases the gap between the rich and the poor, something that reduces opportunities for young people and for families who don't have as much resources or opportunities as other people. And I think that would be a number one priority in an independent Scotland. It's a key issue that Mike and I agree with. It's not about who's in power right now. It's about how we use the opportunity of independence to create the society that we want to see. And I would be supporting a living wage, which means everyone here who has a part-time job would get paid more for the work that they do, because that's good for the economy, and I believe that creates a better society. So that's the type of agenda that I think would dominate in an independent Scotland. But finally, to get on to the fourth and final point, it's about Scotland's role in the world, because, you know, I'm an internationalist. Like, I love different countries. So, like, who doesn't love travelling or reading about other places around the world? And independence is about joining the world. It's about Scotland becoming an equal country, about Scotland joining the European Union, joining the United Nations, and representing Scotland abroad through things like having our own embassy network, supporting Scottish businesses, for instance, in international trade. It's about doing more business, doing more work with countries around the world. Independence isn't about looking in on ourselves or about nationalism. It's about being a more equal, independent country. So, just to conclude, if you came here today uncertain about whether Scotland can afford independence, the answer is it can. If you came here unsure or opposed to independence because you're worried about some of the ideas that it might represent, for me it represents governance, it represents democracy, it represents prosperity and social justice. And I think those are values that we should all support. So hopefully you'll enjoy the debate tonight.
Michael,
you've enjoyed
thank
this
you.
speech. And you'll vote yes in the referendum
Thank
next
you very much.
September.
Michael Gray from the Yes campaign. Thanks indeed to both of our speakers from both sides of the argument here today. We've heard talk of wealth, resources, talent, investment, democracy, tuition fees, but are they pushing your buttons? Is that what you want to hear about? Is that what you're concerned about? Well, let's find out as we ask the panel to answer your questions. All schools in South Lanarkshire were invited along here today, but invited to submit questions to our panel. Some of the questions were amalgamated because lots of people were asking asking about the same thing. Some have been reworded here and there to make them applicable to both sides of the argument, so we can get both sides of the argument, and have been reworded to be applicable to both. So let's get cracking first of all. The first of the questions that have come from our pupil audience here today is this. Does the panel think that the minimum age for voting should be reduced to 16 for all elections in the UK and in Scotland? We'll go to the no side for that first of all.
Hi.
Daniel.
Sorry, I hate microphones. Also, I'd like to thank you all for inviting me here today. I'm sufficiently out of my depth, surrounded by MPs and MSPs. And I'd also like to apologise for being born south of the border, though I imagine if any of you watch football on Saturday, that won't bother you. The answer to this, for me, is incredibly simple. Should the minimum voting age be reduced to 16? Absolutely. In every single aspect of one's life, the state views someone at 16 as an adult. You can fight in the armed forces at the age of 16. You can get married at the age of 16. You can be put in prison at the age of 16. You can incur debt at the age of 16. In every single aspect of life, that is, apart from the political sphere, which I think is nonsensical. I think one of the best parts about this referendum is that 16-year-olds are getting the chance to vote, because it widens the electorate, which is always a good thing. It engages more people in the debate, and it engages people in the debate who ultimately will be the most affected by it. Young people are overwhelmingly underrepresented in elections. And I think it's great that more people are being made to get involved this way. So no, absolutely. I think the minimum age should be reduced to 16 for all elections across Scotland and the UK and Europe.
Thanks indeed to Daniel Swain. Let's turn that over to the Yes campaign and Linda Fabiani, MSP.
Yeah, we have consensus breaking out here between the Yes and No campaigns. Yeah, absolutely. Votes for all elections should go to 16 to 18-year-olds. That's been my own party's policy for many a long year, and Alex Salmond, in fact, used to campaign for that when he was at Westminster. And generally, in the Scottish Parliament, there is a majority, regardless of political party, who would have that as a policy. And that's why, in fact, when we were able to do that for the referendum, it was agreed and quick legislation was put in place. Now, electoral law is reserved to Westminster. And that's one of the reasons, I believe, why we don't have the extension to 16, 17-year-olds for all elections. I would like electoral law to rest in the Scottish Parliament in an independent Scotland so as we could make that decision. And we did hear about there are anomalies in what people can do at certain ages. You know, we heard about that, the armed forces, not vote, not drink, etc., buy cigarettes, all these things. But there's something very, very simple for me. And the Youth Parliament actually did a great campaign in this, and they used this phrase as well. And it was a phrase that was used years and years and years ago when people were being imprisoned and, in fact, in some cases dying for marching and protesting about the right to vote for ordinary people. And it was no taxation without representation. So for me, it's really simple. If you're old enough to work and pay tax, you are old enough and smart enough to vote for what happens in your country. And that's another element of democracy that I think is so very important.
Linda Fabiani there. So we're starting off with a bit of consensus. We're playing nice so far, ladies and gents, but will that continue? Let's find out. Second question that's come from you, the potential voters here. You're asking if there will be more job opportunities for young people in the event of either vote. Let's see how the No campaign would answer that one. Will there be more job opportunities? Yourself again, Daniel. Star of the show.
Unfortunately. Well, unsurprisingly, I'm probably going to suggest there's not going to be more job opportunities in the event of a yes vote. For young people, Michael talked a lot about the economy, and he said, for example, that in the last 5 years, Scotland would be better off if it was independent. That might be true, although that was due to projections. But one thing that the Office of National Statistics and the UK Treasury definitely agree on is that during the financial crisis, Scotland would have been worse off. Scotland weathered the financial crisis much better than the rest of Europe's small countries, including Belgium and the Netherlands, which are about the same size as Scotland, and Scandinavian countries as well. So just some rebuttal there. Another thing that was brought up is that a suggestion that an independent Scotland would have protected Scotland's jobs in factories, despite the fact that all of Western Europe experienced deindustrialisation over the last 30 years. So I think the idea that following independent Scotland we would instantly have more jobs created by a parliament is quite frankly ludicrous. And the idea that all economic decisions will be made in Scotland are also incorrect. The Guardian recently did a report and found that about 80% of Scotland's companies are owned and operated by businesses outside of Scotland. So the centre of economic power would not move to Holyrood or to Edinburgh following independence. So the idea that an independent Scotland would de facto lead to jobs is not necessarily correct. There are also definite economic costs to Scotland that we can certainly look at. There are cross-border trade costs, which would definitely happen. Numerous academic papers have established this. So most of Scotland's business occurs across the border with England, which is barely a border at all because we are part of the same country. That's right. But following independence, there would definitely be a border of trade, so it would be harder for Scottish businesses to do trade with the rest of the UK, and that would limit opportunities. The border would also prohibit movement. So, most importantly, Scots who work abroad, and 1 in 7 Scottish people live in London, would find it harder to get jobs in the UK. And I know lots of friends from university who've gone to London. So,
okay. Thank you very much, Daniel Swain. Thank you. Let's turn to the Yes campaign now. Would there be more job opportunities for young people in the event of a Yes vote?
Lucky me, I get to speak again. Would there be more jobs for young people in independent Scotland? Based on the evidence and the research I've done, the answer is yes. And I'll give you 3 examples of this. One is childcare. So there's a proposal to invest more in early years childcare. And that's good for families and for people who want to work while their children grow up. But it's also good if you want to get a job in the childcare sector. So one of the reviews estimates that there could be as much as 35,000 extra jobs created in the care sector through that policy. So that's one example. A second example is in manufacturing that I mentioned in my speech. So if anyone here studies sort of the science, technology, engineering and maths subjects, look at renewable energy as a huge opportunity for Scotland. In England and in Westminster, they're focusing on nuclear power, which is very expensive and doesn't employ a lot of people. But in Scotland, we have huge renewable energy potential. And I think if we invest in building those tidal technologies that they've just started a research base at Edinburgh for, and in wind and in wave, we can employ thousands of more people in the energy sector. And a third example is to look at exports. Another estimate is that by increasing Scotland's exports or sales to the world, you could create up to 100,000 new jobs with a 50% increase. So how would you do that? One of the key ways of doing it is expanding Scotland Development International, which has embassy and trade and investment posts around the world. So Scotland would have far more posts in places around the world, which means we can sell more goods and increase Scotland's sales and exports. So those are 3 examples, and I'm confident that Scotland can do it. I have confidence in Scotland, because if you look at examples like Germany or like Finland or Norway, there's lots of other medium-sized independent countries that have already achieved this, and I believe an independent Scotland will achieve that and create more jobs for people here.
Thank you, Michael. So some consensus once again, in as much as both sides are telling you there will be more job opportunities for young people in the event of voting either way. 2 sets of examples, though. It's up to you to decide which of those sets of examples resonates more with you. So let's move on to the third question here today. That is, will the people of Scotland be better off economically in an independent Scotland or in the UK? Once again, to the no vote. Annabel, Goldie, MSP.
I'm allowed another 10 seconds for getting the mic out the stand. Angus, thank you very much indeed. I think this goes to the heart of the debate. I think it's one of the most important and certainly one of the most challenging aspects of the debate. And picking up from where Michael actually left off, I mean, what I think is worthwhile pointing out just now is that in Scotland at the moment, thankfully, employment is rising steadily, which is good news. Unemployment is dropping steadily, which is good news. That is all within the UK. I don't think that's unconnected with the bigger market that we have, with a population of mass of 60 billion people, when so many of our businesses depend on the rest of the UK for markets. I think we see that very beneficial effect coming back into Scotland because of the opportunities available. As to whether we'd be better off or not, well, the Yes campaign will argue eloquently, as Michael has already done, about why they think we would be. But I want to give us a starting point, page 75 of the Scottish White Paper, Scotland's Future. That was an illustration of the first year of independence if we had to look after our own finances. It brought out a budget deficit. Nothing surprising there. What was slightly alarming was we now know that the income for an independent Scotland was overestimated. We know the expenditure was underestimated. And that meant the deficit was smaller. And what we know now is that John Swinney's had to correct these figures. He still brings out a deficit that will go on. We don't know for how long in an independent Scotland. But he's based it on a rise of oil prices. And this is what's worrying. We now know the oil prices John Swinney has taken are at the top end of price, at the top end of yield, assuming the lowest prices of production. So I think at the heart of the independence campaign argument for economy is a big hole, and we would not be better off.
Let's see if we have a counter to that from the Yes campaign. Elaine C. Smith.
Indeed, hello. It won't surprise you, given the way the debate has gone, that I'm going to say, yes, I think we will be better off. And what you are faced with here is two sets of teams, if you like, saying, trading figures. And I think, in many, many ways, not that it's not important, but that is not where the real argument is. Although people do want to know about money and they do want to know about the economy, it seems to me that we now live in a country where we know the price of everything and the value of nothing. And if everything in our lives simply comes down to how much something costs, not that that is not part of it, but generally the decisions we make in our life are bigger and higher than that. And I'm supporting Yes. I'll let you know something. I became a grandmother, I know, still only 28 too, 3 weeks ago. And a statistic that was put in the Glasgow Herald 6 weeks ago, just before my daughter delivered, my beautiful granddaughter, that said 1 male child in every 4 born in Glasgow this year, 2014, will not live to their 65. I live in the East End of Glasgow and I have been brought up in Motherwell, went to school in Motherwell, just up the road there. And watched the decline of every industry in this area, stood on picket lines with them all, watched my father be thrown out of a job, my family, lots of people, when a Westminster government turned its back on the people of this area. And now I live in the East End of Glasgow where life expectancy for men on average is 58. I'm sorry. If this is better together, if this is the best of both worlds, you can keep it. The only way that we will control the lives and get rid and make a start on getting rid of poverty, the real scourge of Scotland, is if we have the levers of power in Edinburgh to control it and make a difference in all of your lives.
Okay, some strong arguments there. Catching my breath now. Let's move on to the fourth question now. We'll try and figure this out. I was hoping to alternate between the two sides and let each side lead off. So we'll try it that way now with this fourth question. What additional powers are likely to be offered to the people of Scotland in the event of a yes or no vote? So we're talking about additional powers in the event of a particular vote. Let's go to the yes side first of all. Who'd like to take? Linda Fabiani.
Okay, in the event of a yes vote, we get the government we vote for, we get a government that's accountable to us, we get a government that we can see quite close to us and have a go at if we're not happy with what's going on, a government that will make decisions that best suit the people of Scotland For me, that is the most important thing at all. What we get if we vote no, we've heard lots of talk about additional powers from all the different parties. But do you know what? I do not believe them. And the reason I don't believe them is because they did this before. But even apart from that, within the last couple of years, I chaired a committee in our Parliament that looked at extra powers for Scotland. Some of us put forward that we wanted welfare devolved to the Scottish Parliament so we could be fairer to people. Some of us put forward air passenger duty, things like that, Crown estates that could come to Scotland. And every single one of the no parties said no, no, no. And here we are a couple of years down the line, they're making promises. Well, if they'd really meant it, they could have backed us up at the time of that latest Scotland legislation. They didn't. If they really meant it, they could have worked to put an extra question in the ballot paper. They didn't. If they really meant it, they could have legislated already. I do not trust them. And I don't think anybody else in Scotland should trust them either, because they have never yet put their money where their mouth is.
Linda Fabiani. So to the no side now, what additional powers are likely to be offered to the people of Scotland in the event of a yes or no vote? Mike Daly.
Thanks, Angus. Linda says that she doesn't trust or believe the UK parties to deliver more for devolution. Let me just remind Linda, who was it that delivered the Scottish Parliament in 1999? Can I finish, please? Can I finish, please? Let me rephrase that for Linda's benefit. Who was it gave the people the choice to get a Scottish Parliament in 1999? I'll remind Linda, it was the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrat Party. Who was it that gave the Scottish Parliament more powers? We can now raise income tax by up to 10%, thanks to the Conservative and the Lib Dems in Westminster. Now, in terms of what happens if we vote no, well, actually, there is now a unanimous position between all the political parties at Westminster to give more powers to Scotland. So we're going to be able to, from the Conservatives, control taxation completely. We're also going to be able to, the Conservatives are looking at devolving welfare powers. Labour will give more powers for taxation and also will devolve housing benefit. If you vote yes, you get less powers. I'll tell you why you get less powers, because you become out of the EU, you come out of NATO, you become out of the UN, and actually if you're interested in watching World Cup football, you come out of FIFA. So voting yes means you lose powers, which is somewhat ironic, but that is the position. And here's the thing to remember. The Scottish Government have got powers that they have never used, and that's the bottom line. It's about having the strength to use powers. Thanks.
So tempers are getting a bit short now. Let's have a heated debate. Thanks indeed to Mike Daly there. Defensively, will Scotland be more secure in or out of the UK? So we've come to defence now. Let's talk to the Yes campaign first of all. Will Scotland be more secure if we go your way?
I think the most important question for everyone here to ask is security for who and security from what? So if you talk about defence, the old school way of talking about it is talking about sort of armies and war. And let's be honest, we're not really afraid of the Irish or Iceland or Norway. In the modern world, all countries within the EU work together really closely and are friends and are allies. So the questions for Scotland about defence are about defending ourselves from really specific areas, like the security of the oil platforms, the security of our infrastructure, and most importantly, like just the security of people who live here and their lives. And currently, £3 billion was taken from Scotland's budget last year to spend on Ministry of Defence spending. And a lot of that is spent on things like the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and on issues like Trident nuclear weapons on the Clyde, which were built to have a war with the Soviet Union. Now, everyone here who does history knows that the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. So there's no real point having them there. And in independent Scotland, we'll be able to make defence decisions that suit the people who live here. So that means not having nuclear missiles and weapons, which cost over £200 million a year, and investing that money into areas where it makes more sense for Scotland to have defence. Areas like having a Scottish Defence Force and a Scottish Navy. So if you look at the North Sea, there's currently not one maritime vessel patrolling the North Sea. So we're actually under-defended within the United Kingdom as it stands. Maritime patrol vehicles and patrol vessels, that's the type of policy that countries like Ireland, like Denmark and like Norway have, because it suits countries with a big coastline. So all that evidence shows that I think Scotland would be able to make better decisions in defence and would be able to spend it on issues and in areas where it actually helps people rather than the money that Westminster's been wasting.
So the question to the No campaign is, defensively, will Scotland be more secure in or out of the UK? Annabel, Goldie.
Well, I think worryingly we'll be less secure, and I'll tell you why. At the moment, within the United Kingdom, we have a very significant defence capability. We've got the fourth largest defence budget in the entire world. And if anyone has been watching the news recently, we cannot feel anything but unease about the insecurity confronting our global world. And I want to be part of a United Kingdom where we actually can influence the international stage, where we have a bit of clout to support when unacceptable things are happening. And I believe at the moment within the UK that's what we have. And Scotland is an important part of that defence capability. You only have to ask many of the people in Scotland who depend on the UK MOD for defence jobs, whether that's at Fast Lane, whether it's on our shipyards on the Forth or on the Clyde, building ships for the Royal Navy, what they think of defence. They think it's vitally important. They think that capability matters. They think these jobs matter. And I was interested to see just this morning, a poll has come out. Majority of people in Scotland actually think we should keep Trident. They seem to think at the moment that is an important part of our defence capability. It makes us powerful in NATO. It makes us influential on the world stage. That's how I want us to be, not to be colonialist or imperialist, but to be able to play our part with other democratic allies in trying to keep the world a safer place. And independent Scotland won't have that clout, won't have that world stage.
So there you have it, the opposing views on the defensive position once Scotland stays in or leaves the UK. The next question is a question for information. We're asking how final is the referendum result? That is, what opportunities are there to reverse the decision in future? The No campaign? Daniel.
Sorry, I realised about halfway through a second question I was the only person sat down awkwardly, so I'll start standing up. How final is the referendum? Well, it depends on the result. If there is a no vote, it's very plausible, depending on the exact result, that there could be another yes vote somewhere down the line, especially if it's close. In Quebec, in Canada, when there was a 55% turnout for no to independence to Quebec, there was a referendum about 12 years later, I think. If there is a yes vote, that will be it. There will almost certainly be no possibility of any go-backs. A reunion, as it were, between the rest of the UK and England would require the consent of all of the UK and Scotland. And I imagine there would be a bit of bitterness following that. In addition, it would require a whole new political movement. It's taken the SNP about 80 years to get this question asked, so how long would a reunion movement take? I think it's almost impossible that would happen. Looking at political realities that exist in Scotland, there wouldn't be any energy for that, especially after the exhausted campaign we've just had. So I think there wouldn't be any take-backs on that front, at least not for a very long time. But if you vote no, you might get another yes, you might get another referendum for independence somewhere down the line. I think that's probably the most plausible.
I wish you hadn't stood up. So how final is this referendum result? What are the opportunities to reverse the decision in future? Linda Fabiani.
Well, again, if there's a no vote, it very much depends on the people, because it's the people that deliver these things. It was the people that delivered the government that put through the referendum legislation. So it's always very much up to people. Certainly from a political point of view, the Scottish Government has said if it was a no vote, it would be at least a generation before we'd have another referendum. But if it's a yes vote, you know, Daniel's right in saying it would be a long time before that would be reversed. And who can tell what will happen in the future? But all I would say to you is there's more than 50 countries have become independent since the Second World War. Not one of them has ever asked to go back. I mean, Finland has never asked to go back to Sweden, and that's a country with a bit of clout, along with Norway and Denmark. Norway's never asked to go back to Denmark. And Ireland, which was getting trashed by some people not that long ago because of their economy, has actually got a better growth rate now than the UK. Ireland has never asked to go back as part of the United Kingdom because these countries are normal countries that make the decisions for their people. To me, that's the way it should be. That's why there's 190-odd countries in the United Nations. That's why most of Europe is made up of countries that make their own decisions for their own people and form alliances with those that can best suit their ends for their own people. So I think a yes vote would be final, because I don't think there would ever be any stomach for going back, because we would do very, very well like so many others.
So we're verging on consensus here again, and we can't have that. So let's move on to the penultimate question today. Whatever the result, does the panel anticipate a divided Scotland after the referendum? What's the physical effects of this going to be? First of all, to the Yes campaign. That's Michael again.
Well, hopefully you'll all seen tonight that although this is a really important debate, the most important decision we'll make in our lives, there's a lot that everyone here shares, no matter what your own view on the referendum. And I think that's an important thing to remember. Even though I've come to the conclusion that independence is a great opportunity for Scotland, some people on the other side of the debate have a slightly different position at the moment. And after the result, I think there'll be a greater focus on what we share rather than the fact that we disagreed over one referendum. Like from my speech, I said that this matters to me because it will make Scotland better off, the opportunities for jobs, for having our own democracy and for social justice. And I believe that independence is a way to achieve those things. But that doesn't mean that the people on the other side of the debate don't care about those things too. And they care about those issues just as much as I do, but they just have a slightly different way that they think they'll achieve them through Westminster. And while we disagree about that tactic or that vote, I don't think that means that any of us are divided on the fact that we all live and care about Scotland. And I think that will be the case after the referendum.
Whatever the result, does the panel anticipate a divided Scotland after the referendum? Annabel?
Thank you very much, Angus. A small point of clarification, going back to the first question, Angus. I should say that there's not a no campaign or better together position on voting age, and Daniel gave a very eloquent personal opinion. I don't want to be harbouring under any delusions here or misrepresentations. On post the referendum, you know, at the moment, it's not coincidence that we are in a United Kingdom. It's not coincidence that we, as a population of 60 million people, share so many things. It is not coincidence that all the family countries of the United Kingdom are so mutually dependent on each other. That's about a relationship, about a partnership. And it is interesting that union is not unfashionable. Think of what happened to East Germany and West Germany. They didn't want to remain separate. They didn't want to become smaller. They wanted to unite in a global world and become a bigger entity. I hope, because this is very important for us all, those of us in the panel and all of you, we have to respect the result on the 18th of September. And there's no doubt about it, this debate has become divisive. Indeed, you only have to look at the last question to be reminded of just how unpleasantly divisive in some realms it has become in a very repugnant and offensive fashion. But we do have to respect that result. And we have to do our best post 18 September to work together for the better of Scotland. That's what the country we believe in. Personally, I think the United Kingdom is a good title, a good place, and a good thing to be in. And I would love to think if that's what we vote to stick with on the 18th of September, then unity, union, and being united are the hallmarks of our future Scotland.
Annabel, Goldie there. Divided opinions on a divided Scotland, which takes us to our last question from you, the young potential voters out there, going out on a limb with this one. How can we prevent the personal abuse on social media? To the Yes campaign first. Elaine C. Smith.
I don't think you can. I think we have to police it. I think we have to make sure if anyone crosses a boundary of decency, and that has certainly been crossed over the last few weeks on the internet by certain individuals. But I do believe it is a small minority. And this is not something new. This is part that I believe that the Better Together No campaign, they want the debate to be taking place there. They want it to be all about these vile people on the other side. Apparently, as of the figures I got yesterday, which I may stand corrected, there are only 18 prosecutions or 18 investigations with regard to the J.K. Rowling event going through. Now, J.K. Rowling has every right to the decision and what she does with her money, that we live in a democracy and that is great. But to say that she is only being abused by, or there is an orchestrated campaign coming from the Scottish Government or the Scottish National Party, is insulting. I would like to say that I'm not a member of any political party, but I used to write for the Sunday Mail. 5 years I had a page of my own in the Sunday Mail. I'll bring the files. I'll bring the files of abuse that I have, that have been printed off. One from, we'll have to understand there's a huge amount of misogyny and loathing of any woman that comes out on the internet. Many of the people that are involved in the J.K. Rowling thing also go on and slag off celebrities, anybody in power, politicians all the way through. They have track records. And no one in the public eye is immune to this. Or immune from this. I think if you mention a football team in a column in this part of the world, just see what Graham Spears or Tom English or any of these guys have experienced over the last. And I think the online debate at the moment suits the other side to try and make out that there are all these horrible people involved in this. I think we have to censor it, we have to look at it, but I think it is greatly exaggerated.
Thank you. Metaphorical gauntlet being thrown down there to the No campaign. How can we prevent personal abuse on social media? Mike Daly.
Thanks, Angus. I think the starting point has got to be personal responsibility. As somebody that uses social media quite a lot, it is a problem when people have an anonymous profile. So they feel that they can say whatever they like and it's completely without any consequences. Well, that isn't the case because the police can track you down and you can be prosecuted. So I certainly think we need to have much more enforcement when it comes to abuse. But I do think Elaine is being a little naive in terms of her contribution there, because the second point is one has to have leadership. Now, if we look at the evidence, we've had an SNP MSP accuse members of the public and other MSPs of being anti-Scottish. So the SNP have used the term anti-Scottish, and then we get on social media, you're a quisling, you're a traitor, and so on and so forth. Only very recently, the First Minister's senior special advisor, Campbell Gunn, was having a go at a mum who has a disabled child. And he had contacted the Telegraph newspaper trying to spike stuff. So the leadership is coming from the Scottish Government, and it is negative. We need to get rid of this negative leadership, and we need to ultimately treat people with respect and decency.
Well, there's something to concentrate your minds, ladies and gentlemen. That was the last of our questions for the moment. We'd like to find out what you think now, not necessarily in terms of voting and so on, but we'd like you to get your voting pads at the ready again before we move on. All right, another list of questions. Here are 5 more questions for you to see if things have moved on at all since we started today's event. First of all, have you found today's event informative? 1, very informative. 2, quite informative. Or 3, not informative. Right, 58% of you think it was very informative. 34% think it was quite informative. And 9% of you think it was not informative. Presumably, these people are in another room somewhere. Voting by proxy, in fact. Okay, so that's very interesting. We'll come back to have a think about that very shortly. Let's move on to the next question now. If you haven't registered to vote, will you do so now? If you will do so now, please press number 1. If you're still deciding, or you still haven't registered, do you still not intend to? Or you can press number 3 if you've already registered. So, do you intend to vote in the referendum? Okay, 51% have already registered, and of the rest, 40% will now be registering. Nothing has been said today to change the minds of 8% of the people out there who haven't registered to vote and still do not intend to do so. So let's move on. We asked this before, and we want to see how this compares. Okay, do you intend to vote in the referendum? 1 for yes, 2 for no. Well, that's quite a swing, yes. 93% now say that they will vote in the referendum, as opposed to 85% before the debate today. So our work here is done. Having said which, 7% still will not vote in the referendum. That vote, again, is way down from 10%. So some minds have been changed here this afternoon. Have you now decided which way you will vote in the referendum? Okay, have you now decided which way you will vote in the referendum? 1 for yes, 2 for no. All right, the votes appear to be in now. We're asking if you've decided which way you will vote in the referendum. 77% have now decided, 23% have not. That changes from before the debate today. 63% said they hadn't decided. 77% now decide that they have. Okay, they have made up their minds. So it's now 77 to 23. So again, our work here is done. There's some information into your heads there that has made you decide which way you're going to vote in the referendum. So well done on that. Final question for the moment. Following this event, will you now be trying to find out more about the referendum? Okay, we'd like to know that. Yes, definitely, number 1. Yes, possibly, number 2. Or number 3, absolutely not. All right, I think we're almost there. Following this event, will you now be trying to find out more about the referendum? 51% of you will indeed. 28% might possibly look for more information about the referendum, and 22% of you will not be trying to find out more about the referendum, presumably because you know enough to go out there and make that vote. So that's quite a good percentage. 22 of you will not be finding out more because presumably, hopefully, you have enough information in your heads already to make that decision. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks indeed for cooperating in the surveys here today. We're about to ask each of our sides to summarise for a couple of minutes, but before we do that, we'd like to invite you, the audience, just to take 5 minutes among yourselves to have a quick chat with a person or persons either side of you, to toss around some ideas as to what you think about today's event, what you think about the main issues of this referendum, whether you feel they've been covered or not, and if you're changing your mind. Just have a quick chat among yourselves for 5 minutes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if we could have your attention, please. Thank you so much for your patience and your cooperation here today. We just wanted to give you a chance to have a chat among yourselves before you leave and go about your business or get on your buses and let all this fade into to become a distant memory, to crystallise some of your own ideas before you leave the building here today. Because hopefully we have better informed you in a democratic way as to some of the major issues that are in question here over this referendum. So to give individual summaries of each side's arguments and a roundup of today, I want to start as we finished, or finish as we started even. You know, I'm wishing my life away here, by asking Mike Daly to summarise for 2 minutes. Thank you.
It's actually Daniel.
It's Daniel. I beg your pardon.
I'd like to thank you all for coming. It's really great to see so many young people involved in politics and democracy. It's really inspiring. When I was a lot younger, there was never anything like this. So this is really great. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for everyone to get involved. And it's also really important because this is your future. This is whatever happens on September the 18th, you are going to have to live with the consequences longer than any of us, as much as we wish it not to be the case. It's really important, I think, that you vote no. Because together we can build a better future and a better country, and more importantly, a better world. Scotland, as part of the UK, has a global reach. Scotland has been able to outperform countries of its size within the Union and have a truly international presence. Scotland, England and the rest of the parts of the UK are more powerful together than the sum of their individual parts. We are more united than we are divided, and we have more in common than we have different. We are not as divided as our electoral results and politics suggest, and constant attitude surveys suggest that all the people of Britain want the same thing, and together we can achieve amazing things in the world. The United Kingdom has done amazing things. It has invented the internet, it has defeated fascism in Europe, and along with lots of things. Sorry, I'm incredibly nervous. But we are a United Kingdom. We can do great things, and Scotland is a powerful part of that. Scotland can have the best of both worlds. It can have its own parliament, its own voice, and make its own decisions. It can differ from time to time from decisions made in London, and that is fine, but it does not have to create a barrier between itself and the rest of the United Kingdom. We can act as one united family, and we can change the world for the better. Thank you very much, and please vote no.
Thank you very much to Daniel Swain. To summarise on behalf of the Yes campaign, please welcome once again Elaine C. Smith.
Thank you. I got a bit confused earlier on because I thought Angus had said you had voting pants, not pads. So I wondered how you were actually going to vote down there with voting pants on, but I feel a lot better now. Also, I would like to say this debate is not about identity. We know we're Scots. We know we live in Scotland. That is not what the debate is about. And I would also like to say that everyone on the Better Together side believes and wants this place to be better too. We are not enemies. We oppose each other, but we are not actual enemies. And there will be a coming together and a working together for the better of Scotland, whatever happens. I have come to this conclusion in my life over a long period. I didn't wake up one day, and I want you to take that time as well, and think, I think I'll vote for independence today. Think about it. really look at the arguments, engage in it, and if you still want to vote no to independence, then that is fine. Because you know what is wonderful about this? This. I must have spoken in the last 18 months at 60, 70 different meetings across the world, across the country, all of them full. Friday nights in community centres in Carluke, in Wester Hales in Edinburgh, at Govan, all across the country. And that is wonderful. A dear friend of mine, one of my best friends is, in the House of Lords, is Baroness Elaine Kennedy, a Govan woman, a dear friend of mine, and she headed up something called the Power Commission that was the government had implemented a few years ago. And that basically said that people out here are interested in politics. What we don't like is the way it's delivered. And you have to understand, the other side didn't even want this debate to take place. They don't want us talking about the type of future we really want in Scotland. That's what this debate is about. We're often talked about the utopia, or that we have a dream about where we want to be. Oscar Wilde, I have to say, I'm just going to finish with a quote. Oscar Wilde made a wonderful quote about where we want to go in life. And I have to agree, we have to dream and look at where we want to end up in life. Women wouldn't have the vote if we hadn't dreamed about the type of place or the type of world they wanted to live in. And it is really important that we set sail for utopia. And that is really important. And that is why I'm voting yes. Thank you.
We're all getting quite passionate here today, and why not, indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together in appreciation for our panel. Annabel, Goldie, Mike Daly, and Daniel Swan. Elaine C. Smith, Michael Gray, and Linda Fabiani. Fantastic panellists, fantastic insights into the passion and the power that is at stake here in this referendum, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Before we finish off, I want to thank all South Lanarkshire Council resources who have contributed to the organisation of today's most excellent event. Thanks to all of our invited guests and the parents who have come along to support, and teachers, and all the school staff of every school in South Lanarkshire. Well done to all of you for coming out of the hat to get yourselves along here and represent your school. You have been excellent ambassadors for your schools today. You have behaved with exemplary style. Thank you very much indeed to all of you here this afternoon.